it's Amber. So, a little heads up on this project. I have been working on this off and on since, I want to say August. Might have been September. I honestly can't remember. It's been off and on, in whenever I felt like it kind of deal. And I finally finished it yesterday, which, oh man, I am so happy. So what this project is I have had a bunch of clipboards just lying around. They're not all done. This is probably going to be part one of who knows how many. Because I've got like at least 6 clipboards and I want to do both sides. But for this video I only did 2 clipboards, one side on each, and I did them based on some of the art in Pathfinder, which for those of you that don't know is a role-playing game. It's awesome. I love it. My husband DMs as well as some of my friends, and when we did a lot of gaming before COVID happened, we would all have clipboards. And I figured, you know, I've got time and some of these clipboards could really use a little beefing up. Why not like paint on them and put like really cool D&D or Pathfinder related stuff? And I let my husband choose, and he chose several different images to go off of. And what I'm going to show you today is 2 of those images that I have finally finished. I still have more to do, but we'll see when that happens. Maybe in another 6 months or something. I don't know. It just depends on when I get to them. But enough about that. I'm gonna let you guys check out what happened and how this went and see the awesomeness that is the completion. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it as much as I did making it. So starting right off the bat here, I already have a pre-sketched image on my clipboard, and that is because what I did is I took a bottle of clear gesso, like transparent gesso, and I just went over every one of my clipboards and prepared them, I want to say at least a week before I even start filming. And for both the Tiefling and the Cleric, I did sketches in white pencil. I didn't really think to film it, so that's why it's not on here. But starting off with the Tiefling, you can see that I just start blocking in colors, and to be honest, the skill set that I used for both the Tiefling and the Cleric aren't that much different. Like I said, like I'll say later on in my video towards the end, I did finish the Tiefling first. But at the beginning, when I was just putting down the base colors, I was working on the Tiefling and the Cleric at the same time. And what I mean by base colors is just putting down a solid color, because I find for myself, figuring out my solid colors really helps to just know where everything goes. Like what colors, the skin, the clothing, the hair, what is that base color tone that I need to get? And I just start blocking it all in, placing it in. I had to be really careful with the acrylic because I can't just go and block every color right away, because if I do block it, I have to make sure it's in the actual character shape, because otherwise I can't clean it up. Acrylic is not very easy to clean up. If it's still wet, you can clean it up as you just saw, but if it's dry, you're not going to be able to clear it. It's stuck there forever. Speaking of wet paint, one thing I do recommend, and you'll notice this throughout the video, is if you're trying to mix and do gradients with your paints, you want to work on it while it's all wet still. You don't want to go and try to do gradation when the paint's already dry, because it won't happen. I did a lot of different things in here. There's so much I can't even explain every technique that I used. A lot of it was just practice and just going over things over and over again until it looked right. and tiny brushes. I used tiny brushes and just went over everything until it worked. There's honestly not much to say on it. I did use a ballpoint tool a couple times. For like with the Tiefling, I completely scrapped the ballpoint the ball tool, not ballpoint, it's ball tool, when I went to the Cleric, of course. Oh, that face is horrible. I did struggle really hard with this Tiefling's face, I will say. I think I did better once I finally got onto the clothing. But getting the skin tones and stuff for the Tiefling were a bit difficult, as before this I'd never really tried to do skin tones with acrylic, and like I mentioned earlier about how to mix it, it's considered, from what I understand, mixing acrylic can be very difficult. And it is very difficult because, like I said, you have to do it when it's wet. Otherwise, you are going to struggle and it just won't look right. I mean, it still doesn't fully look right even when you're doing it. Acrylic's not really one of those paint bases that are meant to blend well. I don't know if I'm explaining this quite right, but as you can see, it was just a lot of going over everything twice, 3 times. And, eventually I got where I liked it. It just, there's not much to say, is what it comes down to. It's just the same thing over and over. But yeah. And, oh man, those eyes. This I used the ballpoint tool on here, but when I did the Cleric, I actually just used my really tiny paintbrush that I used for mini painting, and hoi. One thing I did want to do was try and stick as closely as possible to the original material, because I just thought it would be fun. And there's a lot of detail in the original pieces. And I don't know how they made those. My guess is probably either oils, digital, or marker. I really have no idea. I don't think it was acrylic. But I wanted to try and replicate them in some way. Granted, the posing or I shouldn't say, the posing came out fairly close. The proportions on both paintings were okay. They were a little smaller or stouter compared to the actual illustrations, but in my opinion, for my first time actually doing things like this and not actually, just having a direct copy on there, I think I did pretty good. And, they kind of also just, they're kind of a mix of the original style of that in the illustrations from the books, but also, like, combined that with my own style. Like, I noticed the faces on mine are a little more larger and squatter, like a little more squashed or long, they got cheeks. They got lots and lots of cheeks. Compared to the other two, or compared to the original illustrations. But, that's okay, because it's, in the end, it becomes almost, it just fell into my style while also looking like the original pieces, and so you can see where I was going with it when you see the actual content or the actual illustrations. And I have to say, I'm very happy with this. They're really, there's nothing I don't even know how I could explain this, because honestly, I've been working on this for over several months, but so I've lost some of the track. I don't know how I did everything. I can't remember. I just sort of was in the moment for some of these things. And in the end, though, I really did like how they all turned out. Oh man, this was a hard part. I will say I think I did much better on the Cleric. Granted, I attempted the Cleric's details more so later on, which would explain why I did a lot better with her compared to the Tiefling.
But I do like some of the gradation I was able to achieve with the Tiefling. And it's honestly what I think in the end helped me out with the Cleric. Because had I not learned a few of these different parts on the Tiefling, I probably would have struggled just as bad on the Cleric as I did with the Tiefling, if that makes sense. I feel as though the facial construction would not have been as good as it is on the Cleric had I not made that horrifying face on the Tiefling. And here I tried going over with a paint pen first, but I actually ended up going with an actual ballpoint pen or black pen just to give a little definition in certain places and create some line work. I really thought this helped and the whole piece benefited from it. I did do the pen trick at the end of the Cleric as well, but I didn't feel as though I needed to use it as much as I did with the Tiefling. Another thing I'm doing here is I'm using clear, what is it? Clear Mod Podge. It's actually a gloss Mod Podge that I used to just sort of seal everything together. I did this to the Cleric as well, though it's not at the end, I don't believe. I think I lost that footage, or I didn't film it. I don't really know. And here you can see we're at the Cleric now, where I actually did go and do a lot of yellows with her. Like, I did a very yellowy, almost yellowish green kind of skin for her. The reason I did this is that the highlights on the original image of the Cleric are very yellow, and I thought, and I find the best way to build something is to go with the lightest tone possible. And granted, acrylic can cover itself up, but sometimes it's easier to just go over it, just put down the light tones first and then start adding the darks. It's because not every medium can actually have light go over top, and so it just sort of becomes a natural thing to start light and go dark. At least for me, anyways. Yeah, the beginning process of this, I was like, I was worried I was going to make her end up looking like The Simpsons because of that yellow. So I was a little terrified, and I think it's sort of what stopped me from continuing. But at the same time, I just knew I had to keep that yellow there, and I knew that yellow was something that needed to work. The hardest thing with the Cleric was probably the fact that she had a lot of little details, like tons of little objects. I mean, the Tiefling had a lot of little details as well, but those are mostly just patterns and like gradation. But the Cleric, it was everything. There was patterns, there was little objects, sword. Oh man, it was a ton of stuff. Surprisingly, though, I will say the Tiefling actually took longer, I believe, than the Cleric, because both paintings took about 3 to 4 hours in total, with the Tiefling actually taking about 4 hours. So that honestly surprised me, because I really thought that the Cleric was going to take the longest. So, yeah, also, please don't be disturbed by the little dots of eyes. Those will go away at some point when I actually make her look gorgeous and just hot as can be, because, man, I just feel like her face got just smoking beautiful, and her eyes are fierce. Right now, they're really weird, but there they go. They're gone now. But I was really happy with how the Cleric's face came out. Her face, oh man, I love her. I love it. Honestly, I just love the Cleric. Probably because it's the newest one I did, but I don't know. I love looking at her. I think it turned out really good. The highlights, everything compared to the Tiefling. I really did learn a lot, and just from doing that one and then moving on to this one. And oh man, I'm just so happy with how they both turned out. But the Cleric is so good in my opinion. One thing I can tell you is to have, if you ever want to do something like this, especially with blending your acrylics, is try to have a light color, a mid color, and a dark color. I had to use a lot of yellows in this piece, like I said earlier, so I stuck to kind of like a really, like, I tried to use a light yellow and then like almost like a tan a lot of the time, and then a dark brown, and like a dark sienna. Or Sierra or something like that. I have no idea. I don't know the name colors. I just know they're different. Obviously, I'm bad with names of anything. But I found by having 3 different colors, a really light color and a really dark color, and then that mid-range tone really helped when wanting to create a difference in lighting and making highlights and shadows. So for some of these smaller details, all I did was like quick little swipes of my brush and put little dots in them because there honestly wasn't much to them. I just used a mix of 2 colors, put little swipes, and called it done. And then I would go later on with a darker color to sort of outline certain spots. I think my favorite part, other than her face, like, and her eyes, is probably the cloth, and when I was able to do some of the little details, like the patterns. I really got into it when I was doing the patterns. It was so fun. And here, just, oh man, I love her eyes. She's just got, eyelashes are on fleek. Oh, they're so good. Oh, she's beautiful. She's gorgeous. Maybe it's Maybelline, maybe it's paint, I don't know. That was a bad joke, I'll admit it. When doing her main dress, I really liked that because I actually found some really cool ways of mixing the colors between. I did a little bit of dry brushing, actually, in some places, but I think the best part was when I took the fan brush and I just started putting it down and it was able to make the patterns. Like I used 3 different colors. I didn't show up on here. I must have missed it or something. But what I did is I took a fan brush and I just sort of dotted it down in like white and yellow and black to sort of create a bit of patterning. And I was really happy with that. In order to blend some of my shading, like I said earlier, I used some dry brushing techniques. To get the wrinkles and whatnot to sort of blend well enough. I'd show all of this in real time, but to be honest, like I said, each piece took about 3 to 4 hours, and my timeline won't even show more than 10 hours, and I doubt anyone wants to just sit through all the little details, so... I will say another good thing to do, as I'm sure I've mentioned in many of my other painting videos, is take breaks between pieces. What I did is I would use the certain color palette that I needed for certain items like the cloth or the sword, and I would only do those certain colors. Like if I had 3 colors and I needed to use those on one spot, I used those on every spot I could, and then I'd go take a break for at least 7 minutes. I went and took at least a 7-minute break, that allowed all my paint to dry, so that when I came back, I wouldn't have to worry if my hand touched it, and I wouldn't have to worry about smudging. And also it gave myself a moment to just relax and breathe, because sometimes I felt like I wasn't breathing when I was painting because I was afraid to ruin anything. And it's good to take breaks because otherwise you might overdo it. And I know from personal experience, I tend to overdo it if I don't take a break between each little section. And that's just so my work can continue to look decent enough. Otherwise, I feel if I'm rushing myself, I don't do as well. So be generous with your breaks. It's okay to come back and forth, especially when you're working in paint. It's really beneficial. Oh, and here's where I did a little bit of dry brushing for the shadows. I did this sort of muddy some areas up in order to make them look darker, but also have those slight little details. If I had to say one of the weakest points of this painting was, I'd say it was probably this little headscarf. I don't know if it turned out quite right. It turned out well enough for what I was capable of, but I was a little distracted during the time of doing it, so I don't think it turned out as well as it possibly could have. And I feel as though I wish I could have worked a little harder on it. But in the end, though, it still all looks very good, and I'm still very happy with it. I think the hardest part I had with the little headscarf was the fact that it was a very light color, and it was very hard to shade and highlight. Like, shading was very hard without making it look too dark and muddy. I think I managed to achieve it somewhat, but I don't know, the line work seems a little thick, so I honestly think I would have made that smaller, looking back on it now. But I still like it. As a whole, I still like this piece, and I'm very happy with it. And I learned a lot of things from it, too, that I hope to continue into other art pieces that I make. And when I eventually do the other Pathfinder characters on my boards, I hope that they'll even be better than the Cleric, because so far the Cleric's a high bar. Hopefully the next pieces I do will be even better. Oh, this part was fun, because when I did this has a checker marking, and when doing it, I actually managed to make it look as though there was folds in the fabric. And with the checkers, I didn't have them go straight on one another. I kind of had like in certain places where there was folds, I made them like be a little off, like not like line up completely, as you can see. And I thought this really worked well to convey the folds a little better along with the shading, and I really like it. It's probably cool. The fabric was the coolest thing to do in all of this, I think. Along with that face. That face was just chef's kiss. So good.
So, can I just say how happy I am real quick here? Because, like, oh my gosh, when I started this, it was, like, sketches and it was okay, and then there came a moment where I got to the point I just couldn't do it anymore because it's like, oh man, I don't know if this is gonna work. There's all these, like, the colors are just flat and I was worried. But then I came back like weeks later, almost probably a month later, and I start doing this stuff and I'm like, you know, it's like, wow, I'm really happy with how this one came out because I finished this one first. And I thought she looks really cool. And then, you know, I come back over the last 2 weeks, and I think I want to say it's been 2 weeks, and I just start working on this one, and oh my gosh, where she started with just having a yellow face, like yellowish green face, to this, oh my gosh, I am just, oh, I love them. I love these. I cannot wait until I make more of these, until I do the backside, because there's still nothing on the backs, but I can't wait to do the backs of these with other characters and go in on my other clipboards and start making more. Oh man, I cannot wait, and I cannot wait to share it with you guys too, because this is awesome, and just to see how I went from this and to doing this thing is actually really cool on its own, because I finished these, I want to say at least 2 months apart from one another. Because I think I finished this back in November or December, I'm not really sure, and it's February, the end of February now, and I just finished this one. So, I'm just astounded with myself. I never thought I could be this good at painting. I used to be the worst painter ever, and to just see where I've come and what I'm capable of now is just like, wow. 10 years ago, I could barely paint anything. It was a mess, and to see where I've come now, I'm pretty happy. This is pretty dang cool. I'm very happy with both of these, and I honestly cannot wait to do more. Well, and on that note, I'm going to let you guys go. As usual, I will have links in the description below where you guys can find me on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, Coffee, where I do have commissions open. As usual, I will have videos somewhere up here that you guys can check out. Other than that, I hope you guys have a fulfilling and inspirational week, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye!